back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to review 5 books for you, which are 5 of the finalists for SPFBO, which stands for the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off. Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off is a competition that I am a judge for, and therefore I have to read all of the finalists' books. If you want to know more about it, I'll link Mark Lawrence's blog post, which tells you all about it because he is in charge, and also some of my previous videos where I talked about the rest of the long-listed books and told you a little bit about each of them. So these 5 books were all books that I was really hopeful going into and sadly did not love. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, and I'm going to tell you why, but I had a really mixed, kind of not so great batch in a row, so I thought I'd review them all in one video because why not? I don't have too much to say about each of them. So I'm going to start off with one which is called Pilgrimage to Skara. So this book focuses on a man who is called Pell, and he has been living in seclusion for the last couple of years on a farm, just kind of minding his own business. He used to be a really famous pathfinder, which basically means he led expeditions into the sort of wilds of this world, where people could send their young lordlings or ladies with him to acquire powers from wherever their destination was. However, he kind of gave that up and went in search of the quiet life, and he's been living on his own in the sticks for many years. We pick up his story when he is kind of summoned by a past lover of his to take her daughter on a quest. This quest stands out because it is a pilgrimage to the place Skara, which is somewhere that no one has been for many, many generations. So he's intrigued enough to accept, and he has a history with this woman anyway, and he turns up and offers to take Keely, her daughter, on this quest. Now this is where things start to get a little bit weird for me, and the problems started to come in. As a concept, the world is fine, but when the plot kind of narrowed down to just focusing on Pell and Keely, it started to get a bit icky for me, and by icky I mean this older guy, much older guy, was quite interested in this really young girl because he had a history with her mother, and it was a bit weird. Like, I found it a bit troublesome that they were on this quest together and that there would be scenes where he would be thinking about her naked or be thinking about how young and supple she was, and I was not really down for that. It was a bit creepy, and I didn't like it a lot, so I found it a bit of a problem. A lot of a problem. So for me personally, this just kind of soured the taste of the book. Later on in the book, Keely has to strip off in front of our other main character, Pell, and I just found it a bit weird and creepy, and it didn't sit right with me that he was old enough basically to be her dad, and yet he was just kind of ogling her. So I gave this a 1.5 out of 5, which equates to a 3 out of 10 for SPFBO because they rate out of 10. It wasn't my cup of tea. It did make the finalists, so other people may enjoy it, but for me it just was not my kind of thing. Moving on to some more positive reviews, although these were not my favourite books from SPFBO, they were still books that I think are enjoyable. The first of those was Chaos Trims My Beard. This one has the best name in the competition, that is for sure, but it didn't quite come through in the way I hoped it would. It follows a half-dwarf character who is called Ed, and he works as a waiter. He's kind of looked down upon by a lot of the society, but he just does his day-to-day job, and one day he gets involved in a quite mysterious circumstance where one of the guests to a party that he is waiting actually kind of spontaneously combusts, and it's a bit of a problem because it's disturbing everyone else. The guest is screaming quite badly and running all over the place and is on fire, so Ed has to chase him down and hopefully put him out, and this is what he does. However, Ed quickly gets drawn into a plot involving a rat man and spontaneous combustion all over the place, mysterious goings-on in the police force, and much more, and it becomes a kind of urban fantasy noir book quite quickly. Now for me, what I liked about this is that it is very original. It has its own theme completely, it feels very individual and very unique, but it didn't really gel with my personal tastes. I do find reading noir fantasy or urban fantasy a bit more tricky because I find it hard to suspend my disbelief. It's magic in the real world, if that makes sense. I find it quite difficult to connect them in my head, and crime is the same way. I find it weird sometimes if it's too crimey or too urban. It doesn't always gel, and this was one of those times where it just didn't gel in the way I wanted it to. It wasn't a bad read and I enjoyed parts of it for sure, but I didn't find that I connected with the characters, and I found that the world, even though it is very inventive, didn't draw me in the same way that some others do. So I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5. It wasn't a bad read, it was an okay read. I enjoyed bits of it, I didn't like others, but it just didn't really stick with me, and I don't think it'll be one that lasts or leaves a lasting impression with me. So for SPFBO, I gave it a 5 out of 10, but again, it's one of those books that is interesting, potentially, but didn't keep me the whole way through. It was just not interesting enough for me to completely get hooked. I feel like I needed a bit more development, and I needed a bit more character development in particular. He's a funny character, he's jokey, but other than that, he just didn't draw me in. Moving on to another book that is also in the sort of fantasy noir, urban fantasy setting, and that is Jack Bloodfist Fixer. This book was one that I kind of expected to really dislike from the cover. I don't know why, I just prejudged. But I actually did enjoy this more than I expected. I still didn't love it, but I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought I would, which was pleasantly surprising. So this follows Jack Bloodfist, who is a half goblin, half orc, and he and his family and relations have come to our world, and they are living amongst us because they had to escape their world where religious fanatics were after them. It's quite a fun concept because our main character gets involved with helping out the police force very early on, and he is a detective of a kind, so he's already involved in that when we pick up the story. He's not kind of forced into the situation by chance, and I think that made a bit more sense to me. And also I think Jack's character was a bit more fun and relatable and interesting to me personally. He felt a bit easier to connect with than, for example, Ed in the previous book, who I found a disconnect from. This character I'd say I connected with a lot more. And I think the story was helped by the fact that it's all set in our world and it's a detective story, but it didn't feel too magical. The magical elements are more in magical items and magical beings than they are in actual magic going on. So what I mean by that is that of course we have the goblins and the orcs, and we also have elves and things like that in this world, but we find out that there are these magical items that have been brought over from their world, and the fanatical people who were following them are after these items too. So it causes a bit of trouble because these fanatical people eventually get to their planet and they start killing people to find these objects, and that's where our story really starts to kick off, and we follow Jack and his boss as they investigate. Now I did like this book, I thought it was good fun, but for me at the end of the day I wanted a bit more from it. Again, it was a fun read, it was interesting, it had a lot of moments that I smiled or thought were fun or thought were inventive, but it didn't really do anything that I haven't seen before. So for me personally, it was a good read, it was fun, but that was it. And again, I gave it a 2.5, which equates to 5 out of 10. I just don't think it really captured my imagination as much as I wanted, even though it was more interesting for me than the previous one. In terms of characters, the world was very standard, so where one book did well in one area, I think the other did well in the other area, and so they got an even rating in the end from me. The next one I want to talk about is called Tiger Lily, and this one is a book that I thought I would like more than I did. So this one did disappoint me a bit, and that is because it kind of has the makings of what I love in fantasy. It's an Eastern inspired fantasy, so it's set in an Eastern Oriental sort of part of the world, and it's definitely got kind of references to Japanese culture via old mythology, folk tales, and I really like that. However, we follow a young character called Lily, and she's in this world where it depends very much which year you're born, what your personality is like. So for example, Lily was born in the year of the tiger, hence her name Tiger Lily, and so she has a kind of temperamental personality. She is quite feisty and passionate, and this is something that in this time period, which I guess is around 13th century, it doesn't really befit a woman to be like this. She should be meek, she should be submissive, and she's not. And so for me, again, this is something I thought I'd really like, a strong, independent main character who's female, but I didn't. I found her irritating more than anything. I really disagreed with some of her decisions and thought that she made some bad, very bad moves in the book, and I didn't like her. And I think that was probably my biggest issue with this book, was that although the world was interesting and the magic was kind of stereotypical Eastern inspired fantasy magic, but it was there, it was fun, I just didn't like her. I just found her irritating, and I found her to be one of those characters who just kept making the same mistakes over and over. There is a weird gender flip in here as well, something I didn't see coming, but I think is worth mentioning. I don't know if it was handled the best. I feel like there were ways to handle that in a better way than it was. I don't think it was handled as sensitively as it could have been. Maybe it was a choice to kind of spice up the book, or maybe it was something that was always there from the beginning. I don't know, but for me it felt a bit unnatural and a bit forced. It didn't feel like it was a natural part of the book. And so I ended up also giving this one a 2.5 or 5 out of 10 stars for SPFBO purposes. So yeah, it just, I don't know, I was having a bad run of books, guys, but the weird thing is, I thought maybe it was just my frame of mind when I was reading all these things, and I thought maybe if I tried something else it would also be terrible. I read another book in between each of these books, and the other book was always way better than these. So it wasn't even my frame of mind, it was just these books did not agree with me, I guess. Let's talk about the last one I have to review today. The last one I want to talk about is called The Way into Chaos by Harry Connolly. This one, again, is a book that I actually thought I would enjoy more than I did. I think it had a lot of the makings of stuff I enjoy. So again, it's a big sort of epic fantasy, quite sprawling. There's quite a few different characters in this one, and it's definitely got some interesting, unique things about it. We start the story following a royal family, and we know that this royal family treats with a sort of faraway different nation who use portals to communicate with them. So the eve comes when the portal is due to open, and this other race are going to kind of come through, and they're hopefully going to exchange goods and gifts and trade agreements. But instead of the other race coming through, we actually have these monsters called grunts, which come through and start eating people and destroying things, and no one knows why. And the royal family, who are there to greet their guests, are quickly gobbled up, all save one. So obviously that's not a good start to the story, and we follow one of the royals who is hopefully going to save the day somehow with his bodyguard and his cousin and a couple of other people who were hostages when his parents were alive, and yet they are very good friends of his. We follow each of these characters as they escape from the city, and we hear more and more stories about these grunts overtaking places and destroying them and infecting things and just basically wreaking havoc across an entire empire in a matter of days. We're following these main characters as they try their best to escape, but also to rally up a political uprising and get troops and people who can help them take on the grunts. And this is just the first of a trilogy, so it doesn't actually resolve in this book, it's just setting up for the later books to come. Now, what I liked about this was the world. I do enjoy a good kind of classic epic fantasy world, as you guys know, and for me this one worked. Perfectly interesting, and I think the grunts added a new dynamic that I'd not seen with the portal and them just rushing in. It was definitely cool. Also, in the later half of the book, we meet some other insect-like beings and we meet some other races that have really cool magic, and I liked that a lot too. I thought that was really innovative. My problem came with being a little bit bored at times, which is so weird to say because there's a lot that goes on in this book. But I think the storylines that I didn't enjoy were mostly the political ones, or the ones where there was a lot of fighting going on, which are two things that I do struggle with in books. I don't mind politics in books, but I do find if it becomes the main centerfold of everything, it can be a bit dry and dense, and I think that some of the storylines in this did suffer slightly from that. However, I do think the female relationships in this book, for example, we have two characters who are called Kaz and Ivy, and these two characters, they are kind of forced together at one point in the story when everyone else leaves, and they have to fend for each other and fend for themselves, and they begin a really close friendship because of this. And seeing two girls in a really close friendship in a book that is fantasy based with politics and fighting is quite rare, so I enjoyed their storyline a lot. I actually thought they were the best characters and the most developed characters because they really stood out to me. I do think there are other characters who are developed in the book. For example, La is our main royal who we're following, and he is certainly one that we see a lot of at first, but then as the story went on we kind of lost interest, or at least I kind of lost interest in his plot a bit. We also have Tragar, who is a character who I thought was very reminiscent of the sort of old stereotype guard or bodyguard who's loyal to a fault. He definitely had that about him. He did really feel like he was kind of a broken record who was defending the prince no matter what, and I got a bit bored of him. I think he's a trope that I just found frustrating. Basically, I don't know what my problem was with these 5 books, but I found them a struggle. This last one I also gave 2.5 or 5 out of 10. All of them were not great for me. I don't know. Did everyone else just have a really bad batch of books, or did everyone just love these and I'm completely off my head? I don't know. But for me, somehow these did not work. I do still have 2 more books in the SPFBO finals to read, so I will be reviewing them at some point very soon, so look out for that. I haven't started either yet, so I'm hoping that they're going to be better than these ones, but you never know. I'll definitely tell you. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've read any of these books, or if you have any idea about what I might enjoy more, or whether you're going to pick any of them up. I'd love to know. So thank you so much, and I will see you all very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.